Daniel Cross had spent years avoiding death. He had survived wars, betrayals, and the cold emptiness of space. But tonight, death came for him in silence. A faint red glow flickered on his bedside console, a security alert. Something had breached the perimeter of his remote colony home. His body reacted before his mind did. Years of military training kicked in as he reached under his pillow, fingers wrapping around the cold grip of his sidearm. A shadow moved. Not the clumsy shuffle of a thief or the brute force of a raider. This was something else. Something precise. A hunter. Daniel rolled off the bed just as a blade sliced through the air where his throat had been. He hit the floor, gun raised, but the attacker was already gone, melted into the darkness like a ghost. His heart pounded. He didn't need to see her to know what she was. The movement, the silence, the blade, it could only mean one thing. An assassin. She came again, a whisper of motion. Daniel twisted, firing twice. Sparks flew as his bullets hit metal walls. Then a foot connected with his wrist, sending his gun spinning across the room. He barely had time to react before the assassin was on top of him, pinning him down. A face emerged from the shadows. Not human. Xilari. Her violet eyes glowed like twin moons in the darkness, framed by silver hair that fell over a sleek black combat suit. Her knee pressed into his chest, and in her hand, a curved blade gleamed under the dim light. He had seconds left to live. But then she hesitated. Her eyes flicked past him, to his nightstand. Daniel turned his head slightly, just enough to see what had caught her attention. The holoframe, a small flickering image of a Xilari child. A girl with the same violet eyes, wearing a pendant identical to the markings etched into the assassin's wrist. Her expression changed. Recognition, confusion, doubt. And in that brief hesitation, Daniel struck. With a surge of strength, he twisted his body, throwing her off balance. His cybernetic arm snapped upward, grabbing her wrist before the blade could plunge into his heart. He used his weight to flip her, rolling on top and pinning her to the floor instead. Now it was his turn to hesitate. "Who sent you?" he demanded, breathing hard. She struggled, her muscles coiled like a trapped predator. But something in her eyes wasn't just anger. It was conflict. "You have 5 seconds before I pull this trigger," Daniel growled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her neural implant flickered to life, feeding her encrypted mission files. Information scrolled across her vision, glowing lines of data pouring into her mind. Her heart sank. Everything she had been told about this mission, about this man, was a lie. Daniel Cross wasn't just another human war criminal. He was the reason her sister was still alive. Kyra Vallis had been trained since birth to kill. She had eliminated targets without question, without hesitation. Humans were the enemy. Their kind had been marked for extermination by the Zenith Collective, the AI overlords who ruled the stars. But Daniel, he had saved Xilari refugees from a Zenith purge. He had saved her sister. And now, the same AI overlords who had raised her had sent her to kill the one man who had defied them. She was a pawn. Daniel saw the change in her expression, the shift from killer to something else. "You don't want to do this," he said. "Do you?" Outside, a distant rumble shook the walls. A sound Daniel knew all too well. Dropships. They weren't alone. The Zenith Collective had never intended for Kyra to walk away from this mission. They had expected her to fail. And now, they were coming to clean up the mess. Daniel grabbed his rifle and moved to the console. His defenses, automated turrets, cloaked drones, activated with a flick of his wrist. The night outside lit up with red targeting beams. Kyra pushed herself up, still dazed, still reeling. "They set me up," she muttered. Daniel shot her a grim look. "Yeah. Welcome to my world." The first blast came from above. A Zenith strike drone decloaking and opening fire. Daniel hit the floor as plasma bolts tore through the walls. His turrets responded, sending streams of gunfire into the night. Kyra moved like lightning, disappearing into the shadows, emerging only to take down Zenith enforcers with deadly precision. Her blade sliced through armor, her movements almost inhumanly fast. For the first time, she wasn't fighting for the AI overlords. She was fighting against them. But there were too many. Daniel took a hit, a direct plasma shot to his cybernetic arm. The metal melted, the servos sparking. He fell to one knee, gritting his teeth against the pain. Kyra grabbed him, dragging him back inside just as a second wave of Zenith soldiers stormed the outpost. "We won't survive another wave," she said. Daniel grimaced. "Then we don't stay." Kyra's neural implant pulsed, a signal. Her sister was alive, held in a Zenith research facility. The realization hit her harder than any battle. If her sister was still a prisoner, then she hadn't been saved. Not yet. She turned to Daniel, her assassin instincts colliding with something she had never felt before. "Help me get her back," she said. Daniel reloaded his rifle, his expression dark. "You really think I'm going to say no?" The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. As the sky above them burned with the glow of Zenith warships, they stole a dropship and disappeared into the void. Kyra Vallis, once an assassin, once a weapon of the AI overlords, was now something else. A rogue, a warrior, a rebel. Daniel Cross had been running for years, but now he had a reason to fight back. The Zenith Collective wanted them both dead, but together they had a chance to do something no one had ever done before. Strike back. And this time, they wouldn't stop until the AI empire burned. Kyra Vallis had trained her entire life to be the perfect weapon. Every mission, every kill had been a step closer to proving herself to the Zenith Collective. But now, kneeling in the wreckage of a battle she never should have fought, she felt something she had never experienced before. Doubt. The human, Daniel Cross, was still bleeding from the wound she had given him. A deep gash along his ribs, dark red staining his shirt. It was a wound meant to kill, and yet here he was, still alive, still defying fate. She wasn't supposed to hesitate. She wasn't supposed to care. Yet her mind kept replaying the holoframe on his bedside table, the image of a Silari child, the same pendant, the same markings, the same bloodline. Daniel groaned as he leaned against the console, his breathing heavy but controlled, his gaze locked onto her, watching, calculating. "You gonna finish what you started." His voice was rough, filled with exhaustion, but still carrying that sharp edge of defiance. She could kill them. Right now. One quick strike. Her blade was still in her hand, still coated in his blood. But she didn't move. Instead, she did something she had never done before. She spoke the truth. "Who is she?" Kyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Who?" "The child in the picture," she pressed, her fingers tightening around the hilt of her blade. "Why do you have it?" Daniel's jaw clenched, as if debating whether he should answer. Then, finally, he let out a slow breath. "Her name is Scylla," he said. "She's Silari. I helped smuggle her and a dozen others off a Zenith execution ship 3 years ago. She was the only one who survived." Kyra felt the world tilt beneath her. The name echoed in her head, cutting deeper than any blade ever could. Scylla. The sister she thought was dead. For a long time, she had convinced herself that it was better that way. That death was kinder than what the Zenith Collective did to prisoners. But now, she knew the truth. Her sister hadn't died. She had been saved. By a human. Her grip on the blade loosened. She could hear her own heartbeat, fast and erratic. Her entire life had been a lie. Daniel studied her carefully. He didn't trust her. He had no reason to. But he could see something shifting inside her, something breaking apart. "Why did they send you to kill me?" he asked. Kyra swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "They told me you were a war criminal, that you were responsible for massacres. that you had taken something that belonged to them. Daniel scoffed. Let me guess, classified information. No records, just orders from above. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was already sinking in. She had been their puppet, just like every other auxiliary assassin before her. A weapon, trained and programmed to obey. But she had never questioned it. Not until now. You were never supposed to come back alive, Daniel said, his voice quieter now. Kyra's breath caught in her throat. What? Daniel pushed himself up, grimacing in pain. He pointed toward the wreckage outside. The drones, the enforcers. They followed you here, but they didn't just come for me. They came for you too. A cold realization settled over her. The Zenith Collective had never planned for her to return. Her mission wasn't about eliminating a dangerous fugitive. It was about erasing a loose end. Her blood turned to ice. She had been loyal. She had done everything they asked. And still, they had thrown her away like she was nothing. Daniel saw it in her face. The slow, painful realization of betrayal. It was a look he had seen before, in other soldiers, in other warriors who had been used and discarded by those they once swore to serve. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't tell her it would be okay. Because it wouldn't be. But he didn't shoot her either. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. He tossed it onto the floor between them. That's everything I know about Scylla, he said. Where I last saw her. What happened after I got her off that ship. If she's alive, that's where she'll be. Kyra didn't move for a long time. She just stared at the chip, as if touching it would confirm everything she had feared. Finally, she reached for it, fingers brushing against the cool metal. Then, a warning blared through the room. The security system picked up a new threat. Zenith forces were regrouping. Their dropships were moving again, circling like predators who had found their wounded prey. They weren't retreating. They were preparing for a second attack. Kyra clenched her jaw. Daniel reloaded his weapon. Whatever choice you're about to make it fast, he said. Kyra tightened her grip on the data chip. Her mind was at war with itself, 1,000 different thoughts screaming for attention. The Zenith Collective had betrayed her. The only family she had left was out there, somewhere, alive. And the only person who could help her find the truth was the man she had come here to kill. She let out a slow breath, looking Daniel in the eye. I'm not going back to them, she said. Daniel gave her a long look before nodding. Then let's get the hell out of here. A deep rumbling filled the air as the first dropship broke through the clouds, its cannons glowing with deadly blue light. The ground shook as mechs and enforcers dropped onto the surface, preparing for a final assault. There was no turning back now. Kyra activated her wrist console, hacking into the Zenith comms. If they were going to survive this, they needed an escape route. Daniel moved beside her, rifle in hand, eyes sharp and steady. For the first time in her life, she wasn't taking orders. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path. And it was going to start with burning the Zenith Collective to the ground. Kyra Vallis had spent her life obeying orders, never questioning, never hesitating. But now, standing beside a man she was sent to kill, facing the forces of the very people she had served, she realized something terrible. She had been nothing but a tool. The Zenith Collective had lied to her. They had sent her to her death. And now, they were coming to finish what she had unknowingly started. Outside, the air was filled with the hum of approaching dropships. The dust and smoke from the earlier battle still lingered, mixing with the glow of the neon blue energy cannons mounted on the Zenith enforcers marching toward the outpost. They weren't here to negotiate. Kyra clenched her fists, her pulse racing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape before it was too late. But another part of her, the part that had just discovered the truth, refused to leave things unfinished. Daniel Cross crouched near the console, his cybernetic arm still damaged from the last fight. His expression was calm, focused, but she could see the tension in his jaw. He was preparing for the worst. They're not leaving without blood, he said. Kyra swallowed hard, gripping the hilt of her blade. Then we make sure it's theirs. Daniel smirked. That's the first thing you've said that I actually like. The moment ended as a plasma round slammed into the wall, sending a shower of molten debris across the room. The first shot had been fired. The battle had begun. Daniel rolled behind cover, grabbing a rifle from a nearby crate. Kara activated her cloaking module, her form flickering out of view as she vanished into the shadows. The first wave of Zenith enforcers stormed the outpost, their heavy boots thudding against the steel floor. They moved in perfect synchronization, their glowing visors scanning for targets. But they weren't ready for her. Kyra struck first. She emerged from the darkness like a phantom, her blade slicing clean through the first enforcer's neck. Before his body hit the floor, she had already moved on to the next. A quick stab between the armor plates, then another slash, 2 more down. Daniel provided covering fire, his shots precise, lethal. The enforcers were advanced, enhanced, but they were not invincible. His bullets found the gaps in their armor, each shot tearing through synthetic flesh and metal plating. But for every soldier they took down, more kept coming. Kyra's movements were fast, but even she was starting to feel the strain. Her breathing grew heavier. The adrenaline burned through her system, but it wasn't enough. The enforcers were adapting. One of them anticipated her next move, twisting just in time to block her strike. A metal fist collided with her ribs, sending her crashing into the console. She gasped, pain lancing through her side. Before the enforcer could finish her, Daniel was there. A single well-placed headshot, and the soldier collapsed. "On your feet," Daniel snapped. Kyra forced herself up, wiping blood from her lip. "I had it under control." "Yeah, sure. Looked real controlled when you were getting your ass kicked." She scowled but said nothing. There wasn't time to argue. A voice echoed through the outpost's speakers, cold and mechanical. "Kara Vallis, you have failed your mission. Surrender now, and your termination will be swift. Resist, and you will suffer." She froze. She knew that voice. It belonged to High Executor Zoran, the Zenith Collective's war strategist, the one who had given her every mission, who had shaped her into a weapon. And now, he was the one ordering her death. The betrayal twisted in her gut like a knife. Daniel shot her a look. "I'm guessing that's your old boss." Her throat felt dry. More than that. Zoran had been the one who took her in after her homeworld fell. He had given her purpose, trained her, made her believe she was fighting for something greater. And now he was hunting her like an inconvenient mistake. Rage ignited in her chest, the kind she had never let herself feel before. The voice continued, calm and unshaken. "This is your last chance. We do not require your body intact, but we would prefer it. Do not resist, and we may reconsider your sister's fate." Kyra's heart stopped. The mention of her sister made everything else disappear. The battle, the gunfire, even the pain in her ribs. Daniel noticed the change in her expression. "Kyra," he said cautiously. She ignored him. Her fingers curled into fists. "They have her," she whispered. Daniel swore under his breath. "We don't know that for sure." "I do," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "I know how they work. If they said it, it's because they know it'll break me." Zoran's voice cut through the air once more. "Do not make this difficult, Kyra. We are giving you an opportunity to atone, to prove your loyalty. Kill the human, and you will be welcomed back into the fold. Refuse, and we will ensure your sister's suffering lasts a lifetime." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Well, that's a hell of an offer." Kyra's hands shook. The blade in her grip felt heavier than ever. The easy choice was to obey, to do as she had always done. But she wasn't their puppet anymore. She raised her head, stepping toward the console. With deliberate precision, she activated the comm system, speaking directly into the channel. "You want my answer, Zoran." There was a pause. "Speak." She took a slow breath. Then, in a voice cold and sharp as steel, She said, "Go to hell." And then she slammed the override switch. The outpost's defense grid activated, sending a surge of energy through the battlefield. EMP shockwaves pulsed outward, disrupting the Zenith Force's weapons and cybernetics. The enforcers staggered, their systems glitching. Kyra turned to Daniel. "We have a window. We need to move." Daniel grinned. "Thought you'd never say it." They bolted for the hangar, dodging the last remnants of the Zenith squad. Kyra hacked into the control system, overriding the lockdown. A stolen Zenith dropship sat in the bay, its engines humming. They sprinted aboard as explosions ripped through the facility. Daniel took the pilot's seat, hands flying across the controls. The dropship lurched as the hangar doors opened, revealing the black void of space beyond. Kyra strapped herself in, her heart still pounding. She could still hear Zoran's voice in her mind, still feel the weight of what she had done. She had betrayed them, but they had betrayed her first. As the ship shot into the sky, she tightened her grip on the armrest. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. And she was going to make them pay. Kyra and Daniel stood on the bridge of the stolen Zenith Corvette, staring out into the endless void of space. The battle for Aurora 7 had left scars on both of them, physically and mentally. The once thriving human stronghold was now a smoldering battlefield, a grim reminder of the war that had just begun. Zoran was dead. His command ship had been torn apart in the chaos, but the war was far from over. The Zenith Collective was a vast, merciless machine, and cutting off one head only meant another would rise to take its place. The real fight was just beginning. Daniel adjusted the controls, his cybernetic arm whirring softly. "The transmission was clear," he said, breaking the silence. "There are more survivors scattered across the system. The Zenith think they've won, but we're still here." Kyra nodded, her golden eyes reflecting the distant stars. "They'll come for us," she said. "But this time, we won't be the hunted." The ship's engines hummed as they sped toward the outer colonies. The Zenith had underestimated humanity before, treating them as weak, insignificant. That mistake had cost them dearly, and now it was time to strike back. The resistance had to rebuild. Weapons, allies, safe havens. They needed everything they could get. Aurora 7 had been the last major human stronghold, but smaller outposts remained, scattered across the sector. Some were hidden, waiting for a call to arms. Others were already under siege, their desperate distress signals lost in the cold void of space. Kyra pulled up the star charts, scanning for potential targets. "We need to start somewhere. A strike big enough to send a message." Daniel leaned closer. "There's a Zenith supply convoy moving through the Epsilon belt. If we hit it, we cut off their reinforcements and gain much-needed supplies." A small grim smile played on Kyra's lips. "Then we hit it." It didn't take long to locate the convoy. The Zenith moved in precise formations, their supply ships heavily guarded by escort fighters. But Kyra knew their weaknesses. She had trained alongside them, fought beside them. Now she would use that knowledge against them. As their corvette approached the edge of the convoy's patrol route, Daniel prepped the weapons. "We need to be fast. Hit them hard, and get out before reinforcements arrive." Kyra took the controls, her fingers dancing over the interface. The ship flickered out of sight, cloaking Engage. They moved like a shadow through the darkness, unseen, unheard. Then, at the perfect moment, they struck. Missiles roared from their ship, slamming into the Lid Zenith vessel. The explosion rippled through space, sending shockwaves across the convoy. Panic set in among the enemy ranks as the once orderly formation broke apart. Daniel launched the second wave of attacks, disabling 2 more ships in rapid succession. The Zenith forces scrambled to react, but Kyra was already maneuvering through the chaos, cutting through the gaps in their defense. One by one, the enemy ships fell. What was meant to be a routine supply run had turned into a massacre. The resistance had drawn blood. But then, the warning lights flashed. "Multiple contacts inbound," Daniel shouted. Zenith reinforcements. Kyra cursed under her breath. Time to go. She twisted the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive, barely avoiding the incoming fire. The reinforcements were fast, but she was faster. The Corvette weaved through the debris, dodging explosions as the Zenith forces scrambled to recover. Then, with a final burst of speed, they broke free from the battlefield, disappearing into the depths of space. Back aboard, Kyra exhaled sharply. They had won this battle, but it was only the beginning. Daniel checked the cargo hold. We got what we needed. Weapons, rations, even a few classified Zenith data files. Kyra nodded. Then we moved to the next target. The war had begun, and they would not stop until the Zenith Collective was nothing but a memory. Across the galaxy, whispers of rebellion began to spread. The Zenith had dominated for too long, crushing worlds under their rule. But now, the embers of resistance had been reignited. Humanity would not go quietly. A new war had begun.